Sewu sudah mulai tumbuh dan berkembang dalam bidang pendidikan. Salah satu tempat pendidikan tinggi di Sewu adalah Universitas Aisyah Pringsen yang didirikan oleh Yayasan berdasarkan surat dari Kemenristek Dikti pada tahun 2019 dengan SK nomor 417 KPT-I-2019 Universitas Aisyah Pringsen menawarkan konsep pendidikan model ilmiah Islami dengan mengedepankan nilai akhlak mulia dan pengembangan teknologi dalam pembangunan nasional. Inilah terobosan pendidikan yang diharapkan mampu menjawab tantangan zaman dengan kader generasi unggul yang bertakwa, kompeten, dan berdaya saing. Fakultas Kesehatan, Fakultas Teknologi dan Informatika, Fakultas Sosial dan Bisnis.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sebagai universitas pertama di Kabupaten Pringsen, kami mempunyai tekad memajukan pendidikan di Provinsi Lampung dan Kabupaten Pringsen pada khususnya. Adapun visi kami yaitu menjadi universitas yang unggul dalam penyelenggaraan pendidikan tingkat nasional tahun 2030. Kami punya satu model pendekatan dan satu jalur. Model pendekatan kami adalah model ilmiah Islami dengan mengedepankan bina akhlak mulia dan pengembangan teknologi dalam pembangunan nasional. Adapun jalur kami adalah beda, break, energetic, dynamic, accountable. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Mari bergabung bersama kami.
Wah, beda.
Wah, beda. Wah, beda.
Sewu sudah mulai tumbuh dan berkembang dalam bidang pendidikan. Salah satu tempat pendidikan tinggi di Sewu adalah Universitas Aisyah Pringsen yang didirikan oleh Yayasan Aisyah Pringsen pada tanggal 20 Agustus 2009. Berdasarkan surat dari Kemenristek Dikti pada tahun 2019 dengan SK nomor 417 KPT-I-2019 Universitas Aisyah Pringsen menawarkan konsep pendidikan model ilmiah Islami dengan mengedepankan bina akhlak mulia dan pengembangan teknologi dalam pembangunan nasional. Inilah terobosan pendidikan yang diharapkan mampu menjawab tantangan zaman dengan kader generasi unggul yang bertakwa, kompeten, dan berdaya saing. Fakultas Kesehatan, Fakultas Teknologi dan Informatika, Fakultas Fakultas Sosial dan Bisnis.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sebagai universitas pertama di Kabupaten Pringsewu, kami mempunyai tekad memajukan pendidikan di Provinsi Lampung dan Kabupaten Pringsewu pada khususnya. Adapun visi kami yaitu menjadi universitas yang unggul dalam penyelenggaraan pendidikan tingkat nasional tahun 2035. Kami punya satu model pendekatan dan satu jargon. Model pendekatan kami adalah model ilmiah Islami dengan mengedepankan bina akhlak mulia dan pengembangan teknologi dalam pembangunan nasional. Adapun jargon kami adalah beda, brief, energetic, dynamic, accountable. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Mari bergabung bersama kamu.
Wah, beda.
Wah, beda. Wah, beda.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon for all participants. Welcome to our international webinar in Aisyah University of Pringsewu, Kampus Beda, Brave, Energetic, Dynamic, and Accountable. Oke, selamat datang kepada para peserta webinar di kampus Universitas Aisyah Pringsewu, Kampus Beda ya. Oke, today we are joining Midwifery webinar provided by Midwifery Study Program Faculty of Health, Aisyah Pringsewu University. Okay, before we start the webinar, let me share screen the webinar procedure. Okay, all participants are expected to follow the webinar from beginning to end of the session. Ya, jadi semua peserta harus mengikuti webinar dari awal hingga akhir sesi. When register, make sure your email address is correct. Jadi pastikan email yang ketika meregistrasi adalah benar. All participants must use original name on Zoom or YouTube account. Jadi pastikan pakai nama asli ya. And then because of the limitation of Zoom quota, which can only access 500 participants, the participant who cannot join through Zoom can access YouTube streaming WAP TV. Okay. All questions for speaker are delivered through Zoom chat or YouTube and will be read by the moderator. And the 3 best questions will get door prize. It will be announced at the end of the webinar. Jadi semua pertanyaan akan dibacakan, disampaikan kepada moderator. 3 pertanyaan terbaik yang akan dibacakan oleh moderator akan mendapatkan door prize. Kemudian, and then the evaluation link will be shared in the end of the webinar, and it will be closed 3 hours after it is end. Link evaluasi akan ditutup 3 jam setelah acara selesai. And then a certificate will be given to the participant that join the webinar from beginning to the end, filling the pre-post question link, and then subscribe the Aisyah Pringsewu University channel or WAP TV at YouTube. Jadi sertifikat akan diberikan kepada partisipan yang bergabung dari awal hingga akhir, kemudian mengisi link pre-post question, ya ada link pre-post pertanyaan-pertanyaan, kemudian mensubscribe WAP TV. And the last, the committee does not accept any complaint of error of name and identity on participant certificate because the certificate is made using the participant data when they register. Nah, jadi panitia tidak menerima aduan jika ada kesalahan identitas pada sertifikat karena sertifikat dibuat menggunakan data peserta saat registrasi. Nah, baik, before we start the webinar, let us express our gratitude to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala who gave us blessing and life as well as prayer and greeting to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Oke, baik sebelum kita mulai, kita panjatkan dulu puji syukur kepada Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala yang telah memberikan nikmat hidayah bagi kita semua, serta salawat dan salam marilah kita panjatkan kepada junjungan kita Nabi Muhammad SAW. Next, let us listen to the national anthem of Indonesia and also the hymn of Indonesian Midwifery Association. Jadi untuk selanjutnya kita akan mendengarkan lagu Indonesia Raya dan diteruskan oleh lagu himne Ikatan Bidan Indonesia.
Tugas seorang bidan, ku tak ingin dan jasa, semua hanya ikhlas adanya. Ikatan Bidan Indonesia berasas Pancasila, seluruh jiwa dan ragaku demi bahagia seluruh bangsaku. Setiap waktu ku berjuang untuk kemanusiaan, itulah semua tugasku dan tak mengenal waktu.
beautiful song. Okay, next, continue to our webinar. We take a theme about the optimization of children growth and development from early age. Jadi tema webinar kita hari ini adalah tentang mengoptimalisasi pertumbuhan dan perkembangan anak sejak usia dini. In this opportunity, we have a speaker who join with us. They are Honorable Madam Dr. Emi Nurjasmi, the EB President in the Indonesian Midwife Association, and then Mr. Rudolf Seymour Kirby Martinez from San Beda University of Philippines, and then Mr. Dr. Robert Kwabena Yeboah from PAT. Welcome our speaker to Aisyah University. Before we start the webinar, first let us listen to the speech from Rector of Aisyah University, which also opened this webinar. Please welcome Mr. Hardono, SGAP Nurse MCAP, our Rector of Aisyah University of Prinsebu. Mr. Hardono. Please wait a moment. Mr. Hardono still try to join in this Zoom. Okay, maybe we wait a moment. Mr. Hardono still trying to join in this Zoom chat. Hello, Mr. Rudolph. Are you there?
Hello.
Welcome to our webinar, Mr. Rudolph.
Thank you.
What time is it in Philippines, Mr. Rudolph?
Now it's around 2 p.m.
It should be
2.
2. Oh, yes.
How about in Indonesia? What time is it now?
I'm sorry, the voice not.
What time is it in Indonesia?
Oh, I said in Indonesia is 1.
It's 1.
Yes. Have you ever been in Indonesia, Mr. Rudolph?
Oh yes. I went to Yogyakarta last time, and another place. I forgot the name.
Oh, okay. Yogyakarta, maybe Bali, maybe.
No.
No, Jogja.
And Jakarta. I also went to Jakarta before.
Mr. Rudolph, me and my student ever go to Philippines. Yes, Philippines. Yeah. Oh, no, Philippines. I mean, sorry, Thailand. Sorry.
Thailand.
Yes. But Philippines and Thailand is not so different from the demography, right? The food, the...
Well, we are very much different from Thailand.
Oh, different. Oh,
yeah. Okay. We are like Indonesians as well.
Yeah. How about food in Indonesia, Mr. Rudolph? Do you like the characteristics of spicy food?
Yes. When I went to Indonesia, I ate rabbit.
What? Rabbit?
We went to I forgot the name of the temple, Borobudur.
Oh yes, Borobudur.
And along the way, we ate different foods.
Yes. When you go in Jogja, maybe the well-known food in Jogja is gudeg.
Yeah, gudeg.
Yes. But the taste of the food not so spicy.
Yeah.
Yes, merely sweet.
Gudeg every day.
Yes. We are in Lampung. It's about 20 hours from Jogja.
Oh, it's far.
In apa? Penerbangan darat? Penerbangan darat. Jalan. Yeah. But it's by bus. Yeah, by car. Aduh. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, the participant, Mr. Hardono, have joined with us. Hello, Mr. Hardono. Selamat datang, Bapak, our rector in Aisyah.
Selamat datang juga. Hello, Mr. Rudolph.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, Mr. Hardono, the time is yours. Silakan Bapak untuk memberikan welcome speech di acara seminar kita hari ini. Kepada Bapak Hardono, saya persilakan.
Oke, sebentar mereka. Oke, thank you, Bu Eka. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Tabi pun, good afternoon and greeting to all of us, the respectable to Aisyah Institution of Lampung, to their excellency, to all of the keynote speaker, Madam Dr. Hemi Nur Jasmi, as President of Indonesian Midwife Association, Mr. Rodolph Seymour Kirby P. Martinez, PhD from Philippines, Mr. Dr. Robert Kwabena Yeguah from Ghana, Africa. The last is to all the academic program at Aisyah University of Pringsewu, Lampung. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Thanks God for the presence of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, God Almighty, for the abundance of grace we are given health and of the opportunity to be able to take part in international webinar, even organized by Midwife program at Aisyah University of Pringsewu, entitled the optimization of children growth and development from an elderly age. I appreciate to the international webinar, which indicated that our intellectuals are still thinking and active in academic activity during on pandemic COVID-19. We ask the committee and academic program at Aisyah University of Pringsewu Lampung graciously welcome, and we would like to say thank you for the willingness of the participants who joined this webinar. Hopefully, this event can be useful and broaden our insight, and take your time for joining. Our gratitude also goes to the committee who have helped this event was carried out. This event objective is to provide the information and knowledge to students and the general public in optimizing children growth and development from early age. For that, we present the keynote speaker who are expert in this field. Alhamdulillah, our event this time was carried out with high enthusiasm from the participants. The last report I received was that the number of participants who registered was no less than 4,700 participants, and they watched both through Zoom meeting and YouTube. Hopefully, this webinar have many benefits, and it have to improve the knowledge insight of the participant and college, so that we can hold a similar even in the future with more interesting theme than before. In the last, keep enjoy this international webinar. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat mengikuti.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Hardono, for the speech. Terima kasih, Bapak, sudah memberikan kata-kata sambutan untuk acara webinar ini. And now we are at the main part of our webinar. Will be guided by the moderator, Miss Devi Gustianing, or we call Miss Devi. Maybe to Miss Devi. Time is yours, Miss Devi.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bu Eka. Okay, thank you so much, Bu Eka, for the times that given to me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon to you all, and good afternoon to all the speakers here. To His Excellency, Director of Aisyah University of Pringsewu, Mr. Hardono S. Nurse M. The respectable to the President of IBI, the Indonesian Midwife Association, is Madam Dr. Emi Nurjasmi, MKes. And then the honor for the second guest speaker is Mr. Rudolf Simmer Kirby P. Martinez, PhD, MA, RN, CAA, LMT, CSTP, the chairperson of San Beda University of Philippines, Magadang Hapon Po. And then the third speaker is Dr. Robert Wabena Yeboah as the Senior Technical Advisor of PET International NGO. And best regards to the head of Midwifery Study Program of Applied Bachelor Program of Aisyah University of Pringsewu, Madam Eka Triwulandari SST MKep, and all the lecturers of Aisyah University of Pringsewu. Pleasantly welcome to this webinar. Last but not least, this welcoming program is the important ones. They are the participants. The participants are the midwifery students and the general participant from the other fields. So pleasantly welcome to this international webinar. Takes your time. Selamat datang untuk para peserta webinar. The respectable to all the participants here. I'm Devi Gustiani as the moderator of this international webinar. I'm very pleased to see you all. It's really to be honored for me to be a moderator for this part of this session. And then this webinar is conducted by Midwifery Study Programs, and it is supported by Aisyah University of Pringsewu. And then the titles of this international webinar is the optimizations of children's growth and development from an early age. Today, we have 3 speakers, but I'm going to read the first speakers from Dr. Emi Nurjasmi. And then the second speaker will be Mr. Dr. Rudolph, and then the last speaker is Dr. Robert. And maybe I'm going to say hello with Dr. Emi Nurjasmi. Oh, Rudolph first. Oh, I'm so sorry because Dr. Emi still have another affair, so we have to change this one. The first speaker will be Mr. Rudolph. Hello, Mr. Rudolph. Hello, magandang hapon po.
Magandang hapon.
Okay. Hello, sirs. Good afternoon.
Good
Okay.
afternoon.
For Dr. Rudolph, before that, I'm going to read the curriculum vitae from Mr. Rudolph. Okay. For the respectable to all the participants, we are going to the next session. The speaker that we waited for from the Philippines, he is Mr. Rudolph Seymour Kirby P. Martinez, PhD, MARNCAALMT, CSTP, as the chairperson of San Beda University of Philippines. Let me tell you the participants about the personal data. He is Mr. Rudolph S. Filipino, and he was born in Manila, April 14, 1986, and he lived in Unit 1, hashtag 304, 15th AVA ST City. And his education backgrounds, the first is about graduate school. He is already doctor, but he another takes course, the doctors. The doctor is Doctor of Philosophy in Nursing Science in Applied Cosmic Anthropology. And then the Master of Arts in Nursing major in Clinical Nursing. And for the territory of the education of the Bachelor of Science in Nursing. And then the past work experiences, he is the chairperson of San Beda University College of Nursing, since August 2016 until present, and from Arellano University, Manila. Special interest is nursing research or caring phenomena, medical anthropology, and cultural studies. Okay, that's all the simplified identity from Mr. Rudolph. In this session, he will deliver the course entitled Caring for Children in Crisis Situation. This is an interesting topic, right? Because we know that nowadays is area is about COVID-19. So we have to know it about how to care for the children itself. So please surely welcome to Mr. Rudolph. Give your time to deliver the courses for us. And then you have time 45 minutes to deliver the course. And then the sessions of the questions will be followed later on. Okay, please surely welcome Mr. Rudolph. Time is yours.
Okay. Is my slide on now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Selamat sore for my Indonesian participant.
Selamat
So,
sore.
Hey, Mister.
terima kasih. So I was tasked to talk about how to care for children in crisis situation. So the title of my presentation is The Language of Compassion, Caring for Children in Crisis Situation. As a formal personal disclosure, I am connected with the San Beda University as the chairperson of the Research Ethics Board, and I am also a part-time lecturer in Arellano University in Philippines. I have no conflict of interest, and at the end of this presentation, I will give QR code so that the handout for this presentation will be given to the participants.
Okay.
So my perspective, first and foremost, I am an anthropologist. It is my first PhD and also a nurse. My training is on palliative care, crisis communication, psychological first aid, and caring science. So the perspective of this presentation will be the perspective of nosology with some elements of caring science and palliative philosophy. Some disclaimer before we move on to the topic. This is not a training for guidance and counseling, nor this is a training for psychological first aid. It is also not a special psychological technique. What we will be discussing is answering the basic question, how can I express compassion when I am caring for children that are on crisis? Remember that crisis phenomenon are out of the ordinary. Crisis is a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger in which a solution is needed. Crisis phenomenon are not normal. So this is the world that we live in today. COVID-19 is a global problem and it will most likely stay beyond 2020. Because of COVID-19, all people are affected, regardless of age, race, sociocultural, or political affiliation. But what is often misunderstood or often missed is that all people will experience a form of loss because of this pandemic. Crisis has taken a new meaning in the COVID-19 era. Now, crisis is not all about a man-made or natural disaster. We consider crisis moments, those moments within the COVID-19 era. Crisis situation now does not only mean post-disaster. Crisis may be present even though there is no obvious disaster that has happened, man-made or natural. And we all know that children in crisis situation respond differently compared to adults because children are a unique individual than adults. What may be good for adult patient may not be good for children at all. So what is often misunderstood? The following are false when it comes to crisis situation in children. First thing that is often misunderstood is that we often believe that majority of children exposed to traumatic event will be traumatized. They will be not. Okay. Also, there is a false notion that children exposed to trauma will suffer long-term debilitating sequences. Most of them will not. Another one is that for children in crisis situation, there is always a need for clinical intervention. It is again false. It's not true. And lastly, children will generally respond to crisis in a predictable way is also not true. They will be unpredictable in their response to a different crisis situations. So what does the evidence say? If you will search literature on caring for children in crisis, we will see some nuggets of information such as, number one, according to Copland et al. In 2007, majority of children exposed to traumatic event do not develop traumatic disorder, except after multiple traumas or a history of anxiety. So generally, children are resilient. Next is that the significant predictor of continuing problem at 1 year after war were pre-war trauma disorder, psychological stressor within the family, and directly witnessing of war events such as injury and destruction at home. Meaning those children who are already at risk are more likely to develop long-term consequences of crisis situation. For normal children, they won't develop anything at all. Also, according to Stallard et al. In 1999, the rates of self-discovery are high among children. So they tend to be resilient as compared to an adult person. And lastly, crisis is always seen through the lens of culture. Remember that culture defines what is childhood. Childhood in different countries may mean different things. And it is also that culture that set aside the different coping mechanisms of community and its people within. So what does generally all of these things say? Generally, children are resilient. So the big question now that we need to ask ourselves if we are caring for children in crisis is, number one, do I need special training to express compassion as caring when dealing with children in crisis? Is good intention not enough to express compassion? As well as, how can I express compassion with children on crisis situation? Let us remember that this is the perspective of caring in crisis. There are different levels of caring for children in crisis. At the base is providing security and services. For example, you provide food and shelter. Next is the family and community support. Next is a focused, non-specialized support. And at the very last one is the specialized services, an example of which are clinical mental health services for children suffering mental disorders. We need to remember that your role as midwife or as nurses, as healthcare provider, is within this first two levels, we must aid and coordinate. We provide the care that they need. And if you have no training or no specialty training, the next two layers, what we do is we just assess and refer appropriately. Why? Because we are not sufficiently trained to provide those specialized services. But what is often missed in the perspective of caring in crisis is that all of these will need one thing, and that is the language of compassion. So the focus of this presentation is this language, the language of compassion. Let us remember that according to the perspective of nurseology, persons like children are unique, unpredictable, and exist within the moment, meaning children will respond differently to the same crisis situation. So we really don't know how children will react to a crisis situation because they are uniquely different from each other. According to Sister Roach in 2002, there are many different forms of caring. We have compassion, competence, commitment, confidence, conscience, and comportment. But when caring for children in crisis situation, we focus on one thing, and that is compassion. So how do we express compassion? We express compassion when we are dealing with children in crisis through three things, and that is empathy, authentic presence, and immediacy. We will be discussing this later in detail. Now, this is the thing that we need to be reminded of ourselves. Children, when they are undergoing crisis, they need to do two things at the same time. They need to experience grief, and at the same time, they need to avoid that grief per se. It is this thing between avoiding and experiencing grief which allows them to have meaning of their situation. Children cannot always run away from grief. They must face it. But children are also not allowed to be in grief for the longest time. They also need to avoid it. So when you are doing compassion with children in crisis, you need to be at the middle. You need to let the children experience grief, but at the same time avoid it. Okay, that is the focus of compassion. So what needs to be done? How do we express this compassion? There are two main ways on how this should be done. Number one is at the personal level, and number two at the organizational level. On the personal level, we need to understand that there need to be three processes for compassion to occur within the crisis situation, especially with children. We need acceptance, connection, and availability. The first one is acceptance. We need to ask ourselves, if there is a child in crisis, for example, there is a child who approached you because their mother died because of COVID-19, you need to ask yourself, are you ready? Can you provide what these children needs? Can you refer if you cannot? The reality is that we cannot answer for all of the concerns of all children. There are times when we are not available. And if we are not available or we cannot give time to these children, we need to refer them to appropriate person. Remember this one. When children, any age, especially adolescents and middle-aged children, school-aged children, when they approach you because they have crisis, that is a unique moment wherein they allow you to actually be within their life. So if you are not available, you need to refer them. Referral is necessary. Now, the main thing that we should remember is that the other person, especially children, they will come when they want to come to you. You cannot force them to open up to you. It needs to be from them. Also, we should avoid assuming things. For example, these children, because their mother died because of COVID, approach you and ask, I do not feel good. I feel sad. So we should avoid saying things like, I think I know what it is all about. Or saying things like, you just lack faith, you need to pray some more. Or we should not say to these children things like, I think you should focus more on positive things in life. Mainly because we do not know what is happening to them at the moment. Okay? We need to be open. And being open means we do not assume that we know things simply because they are children. Sometimes the perspective of children is very different from the perspective of an adult. Their focus is the now. What is the concern of the now? There are children, for example, after their parents have died because of COVID, their main problem is, when will my parents be awakened? When will he move again? That's the main concern of children because they do not have a firm grasp of what is death and dying at the moment. So again, we should never assume that we know what is the concern of these children. So we must provide a space wherein these children can talk to us. For example, if you see a children in the hospital, waiting outside the hospital, and all of the family members are inside with the dying relative, maybe because of some form of disease, we should provide a sacred space wherein the children will open up to us. Sometimes the hospital setting is not a very good place where children can actually say things or open up things to us. We should provide that space. For example, we can tell this to the children, if you want to talk to me, I can go with you to the canteen. We may talk there. You need to let the space be there so that the children will open up to you. Providing the sacred space is necessary for connection to occur. And the next process that needs to be there is the process of connection. Remember, children in crisis, whatever the crisis may be, their main concern mainly involves the here and now. They do not want to find meaning in life. No, they don't. What they want to be answered is their concern at the moment. When will we eat? What time will we eat? What time can I see my mother again? What time can I go home? I am feeling anxious now. Their main focus is the here and now, not the past, not the present. So when children went to you, you should remember this. These three ways, empathy, immediacy, and authentic presence, all of this needs to be there for you to be able to care for children in crisis. You do not need special training. What you need is being mindful of the moment. You need no special training for you to become compassionate. So, when you are talking with children, you need to be sensitive to the community culture and use an age-appropriate words with children. What do we mean by being conscious to the community? There are some community wherein death is not talked about more openly as compared to others. In Asian countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, we don't talk about death in front of children. We shy away from that topic. So, for example, some children would go in crisis simply because they do not see their mother, their father anymore. And the whole family is not telling these children that their father is not already here with us. He died. He's dead. We often shy away from the topic of discussing death to children simply because we believe that it would be better for the children not to be told of the truth. Remember, when a children ask you for the truth, you need to tell the truth, regardless of the circumstances. One way or another, they need to find it out. And the best way to actually tell them about that the reality is the person that they are asking, not other person. So we need to remember this. When talking with children in crisis, we need to listen to understand, not listen to respond. We need to take in the whole story of the child to understand the child more, not merely to respond. Because we need to be direct and honest. If you do not know the answer, tell it directly to the child. For example, there are incidents, for example, there is a disaster and the children is in crisis situation because that children is removed from their family. And you see these children, you are taking care of the children, and these children ask you questions like, when will I see my family again? If you do not know the answer, you tell it directly. Do not say things like, we will know for sure. Because sometimes, if the things that they are asking of you, you do not know, you tell it directly to them. I don't know when you will see your parent, but we will try to coordinate with this one so that it would be easier for you and for us as well. So remember, we need to be direct and honest when dealing with children. And also, when children are in crisis, their focus is the now. Their focus is the moment. When they are talking with you and they are in a crisis situation, the center of the topic should be them, not you. It should not be the nurse or the midwife that is the center of the discussion. When a children in crisis approach you and tells you things like, I find it difficult to live now, or I am sad because I don't see my father anymore. So you don't tell those children things like, you know what, when I was young, I have worse experience than you. It's not helpful because the focus is the children, not you. So you don't compare what happened to you before to what is happening to these children. And also, you may say things that, I don't fully understand what is happening, but if you want, we can talk about it today and we can play up until afternoon if you want. Okay? You need to be honest. You need to be direct. And remember this one, most often than not, we do not use humor or jokes. Although we have good intention, it is not appropriate with children in crisis situation. Although we want them to laugh, but most of the time, humor would do an opposite. So I specifically emphasize this one because in the COVID era, most often than not, the majority of questions with children in crisis situation are questions regarding death and dying. Remember, because of COVID, many children will be faced with the reality of death and dying. And some children are alien to these concepts. Also, when we want to talk about caring in crisis in children, in the COVID era, the most of the fear of children in the COVID era is them dying or a family member dying. Simply because they have not fully grasped the idea of what is death and dying. So in 1995, as early as 1995, Space already emphasized that death is not a single concept. It is composed of several distinct concepts, and children may have different levels of understanding of these components. So there are actually five components that children need to understand when you want to talk with them regarding death and dying. This is a reality because in the COVID era, they will hear news about death and dying. Maybe not directly from their family, maybe from a distant relative. And you need to explain it to them because most of the time, their crisis situation will emanate from a misunderstanding of what really happened to a dying or a dead person. So the first component is inevitability. It is the acknowledgement that all living things must die. Next is universality. It is the understanding that death must happen to all living things. Next is irreversibility. It is the recognition that the dead cannot come back to life. Most children do not have a grasp of irreversibility. Early children would often associate death with just like someone who is sleeping, and they will be awakened up after some time, and they will be stressed upon learning that this person will not be awake anymore. Another component is the cessation, the understanding that death is characterized by the cessation of bodily processes. This is for a more advanced age children. And the last one is causation, that death, the understanding that death is ultimately caused by breakdown of bodily function. So if the children knows all of this component, you can directly talk with them regarding death. You can be brutally honest with them and they will understand. So we must also remember that children who have a sense of loss is in crisis situation. And because of this sense of loss, they will undergo one thing, and that is grief. The only way to actually make sense of loss is to undergo grief. It is true in children as well. So when you are helping children cope with grief, you need to remember what Davis said, the acronym is CHILD. So letter C is consider the following: the unique situation of the child's, the ability to understand things, and his concerns, thoughts, and feelings. H is be honest. You need to use the D word, death, dying, die. You need to avoid euphemism, such as telling that, oh, that person is not dead, he's just sleeping. It will not be good for children. They will be in a more stressful situation. So do not explain to a child that the dead person is sleeping or they are just on a trip and they will go back. No, they need to learn and understand with honesty. I is involving the children. Let the children know what is happening, if possible, even before death occur. This is now what is very difficult in the COVID-19 era, because if the family member is actually the one in the hospital, she or he is separated from the family. And most of the time, it is the children who has no idea what is happening with their relative, especially their mother and father. So what we advise is to use technology. You let the child see the mother and father when they are available, even if they are dying. Why? Because the children needs to be involved. They need to see what is happening to their parent. So they will not expect for things that will not happen. And involve the child in saying goodbye to the dying or deceased, especially if it is the parent. They need to express their grief as well. L is for listening. So it is always a good thing for children in crisis, especially those children that are grieving for a loss of a loved one, to give them outlets for expressing their grief. This is what what we mean by having experienced the grief and avoiding it at the same time. They need an outlet. For children, drawing may be good, listening to music may be good, stories may be good, and other things. Also, they need to be aware of thoughts and fantasies children may have of being reunited with a person who has died. This is normal for children. We should not be alarmed. If a child that has a parent who just died tell you, I want to be with my mom, it does not mean that the child wants to commit suicide. No, this is just part of their grieving process. So it's normal. We did not refer the child to a psychiatrist or psychologist. Okay? And we need to clarify that death is not the result of the child's action or thought. There are instances wherein, because the children are removed from the experience of dying and they do not see their parent who are in the process of dying, they will believe that the death of their family member is because of their actions and thoughts. Younger children may have this thinking that it is them that is the reason why their family member has died. That is why it is essential for these children to be updated of what is happening and to clarify with these children that it is not the result of their thoughts on action. That is why that they are not the reason why their parents are dead. They are not the reason. Okay? And again, because they are children, we need to do it over and over again. So they need to see, the children needs to see an honest expression of caring, expression of emotions from adults. So remember this, if you are the parent or the family member of a children and you just lost a relative, it is okay to cry in front of the children. It's okay. If you are a midwife or a nurse and you are taking care of a children and this child has a relative who just died and you are close to the family, it is okay to actually let your emotions be seen by this child. Why? Because children need to see an honest expression of emotions from adults. And remember that authentic presence, you, the nurse or the midwife, being there with the children while they are in the crisis situation, is the most potent drug of humanity. Why? Because children will seek companionship to share their burden. Sometimes they will not talk at all. They just want someone to be with them in times that they are undergoing a crisis situation. Remember that you are there with these children in crisis situation as an authority figure and as a human being as well. So what we need to understand is we focus on the moment, the now. And the concern should be the concern of the children, not you. So if the concern of the children does not involve anything about you, do not share anything about yourself. For example, do not say things like, let's not talk about negative things. How are your friend, by the way? Because that is not the concern of the children. You focus on what is the concern. Also, avoid offering solutions. Most of the time, they only want to be listened with. This is the thing that we need to remember. We avoid fixing the children. We do not need to fix them. They will cope as they are, when they want it, as they want it to be. So we avoid telling children things like, oh, why don't you just sleep? Or eat some more, or pray some more. We do not fix them. If the children wants to cry, you let them cry. If the children wants to play right after their parents are buried, they want to play with you play with them. They have their own facing and coping because there are different persons. So do not fix these children. They don't need to be fixed. Because at this moment, during crisis situation, we assume the role of a companion. Remember, Parker Palmer once said that the human soul doesn't want to be advised or fixed or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed, to be seen, heard, and companioned exactly as it is. We don't need to fix everybody. And immediacy is the sense of being there when the children needs you. Now, in the COVID era, this is a bit difficult because sometimes we are not allowed to be with the other person, or especially children, because children are at risk of contracting COVID. So what we always say is that immediacy, you can be there digitally. How? You do calls, you Facebook, you do Zooms, webcam. You use technology as much as possible for the children to open up to you and for you to be there with them. Remember, one of the fear of children in crisis is to experience crisis moment alone because they need companionship. And when they want companionship, they will go to you. You do not need to force them to go to you. If you force open a cocoon, it will destroy the pupae. You cannot force children to open up to you. They will open up when they want it. And the last one would be availability. We need to follow up with them. And if we feel that these children needs referral, the top level of the crisis ladder, we need to refer them appropriately. So what I would advise is for you to have referrals or contact number of people that you can refer to these children. We need to have those contacts. Anytime that we need to refer someone, we can give them the contact. Also, do not make unachievable promises. So do not say, I will fix this, because sometimes you cannot. And also, do not say things like, we will do everything to fix this. They need to learn to understand that everything will not be fixed. There are things that are unfixable. It needs to be broken. It needs to stay broken. Okay? So what you need to do is be specific and realistic. Instead of saying children that you will fix everything, why don't you just tell them, I will accompany you here if you want. I will be here. We can play until 3 p.m. if you want, or until you want to. I can play with you today. I will give time for you today. Okay? It's more realistic than telling children we will fix this. Let us remember also that we should say what you mean and mean what you say. So do not always say that I am always here for you, because children will take it literally. Some children will take it literally. For example, if you tell a child that you can call me anytime, some will call you at 2 a.m. in the morning. Or some will approach you at wee hours of the night, because some children will take it very literally. So what we need to do is to be very exact. For example, you can go to the nurse's station. I'm here until 2 p.m. Or you can go to the nurse's station, but if I'm at home, I will not be with you anymore because I need to be home. The children needs to know when are you available to be with them, so that they will not look for you. Because again, we cannot be forever with them because we have other things to do. We have other aspects of our life to perform. And one thing that I always tell my other healthcare professionals is, in this time of COVID, because we are dealing with children in crisis, people in crisis, we need to have a body, because we are not immune to stress and crisis as well. There will be times that you will feel anxious, you will feel tired, you will feel exhausted, and it is a good thing to have someone to actually help you during those times. Why? Remember, you cannot provide things that you do not have. If you are in a crisis situation yourself, you cannot provide compassion to other person, especially children. So this one is continuous, unique every time, and it is always imperfect. Every moment with your children is a new connection. For the organizational, this is just an additional. For example, you are working in an organization that deals with children in crisis. What we need is the following. We need to have the right message at the right time from the right source, because this will reduce anxiety and save life. So if you are working in an organization dealing with children, it needs to have a clear and well-disseminated guidelines. They need to have available resources for referral. For example, if you are working in the hospital, you are dealing with children, do you have appropriate referral? For example, the children need psychological help. Do you have appropriate referral? For example, if you think the child will benefit from art therapy, if the child if you think the child will benefit from puppet therapy, do you have referrals? We need referrals because again, we need help of other discipline. Next, there should be a delineate roles and responsibilities within the member of the organization. Not only children, but the parents of the children needs to learn whom to reach or whom to go to when they are in crisis. When will the parents and the children go to the midwife or to the nurse or to the psychologist or to the psychiatrist? It needs to be very consistent. If it does not involve a very severe form of distress, you do not need to go to the psychiatrist. Talking with a nurse and a midwife will help a lot. So the roles and responsibilities needs to be very strict and firm. And we should focus more on people rather than program. And during these times, compassion must take precedence over justice. So this is an example of an editorial for compassion. If you are an educator, you just copy this one and it will provide you the link where you can download. And we should always remember that the human person is like a firefly, especially if you are a healthcare provider, if you are a nurse, if you are a midwife, if you are a doctor. We are a firefly. We give light and hope to others even though their own light is flickering. Remember that crisis moment may dimmer our light, but it will never go out. Sometimes what we need is to see the light of others to remind us of what we are capable of. Nurses, midwives, and doctors and other healthcare providers are fireflies. We are always a beacon of hope in these trying times, especially with children in crisis. These are some of the resources, and as promised, these are the resources and the handout of this presentation. These are the QR code. You just scan them, and all of what I have been talking about will be downloaded in your device. And that ends. Thank you. Salamat. Terima kasih.
Okay, salamat po, sir. Okay, it's very great information that I can catch from Mr. Rudolph. So I, as the moderator, I'm going to give the note lines of the materials of Mr. Rudolph to the participants. Caring for children in crisis situation is a very important, right, sir? Because a crisis is a time for intense difficulty, trouble, or danger, and need specialized caring for the parents itself. And then I can catch the point from the stand for child. Yes, sir. There is consider, honesty, and then involve, listen, and do it over again. So I can catch the point for that. Okay. Thank you, sirs. And please welcome Mr. Dr. Robert Wabenayebo. Welcome to this international webinar. And then Madam Dr. Eni Nurjasmi Mkes. Please really welcome. Selamat datang Ibu and all the participants. So today we are going to the next session. This is our session that we waited for. It's about questions and answer sessions. And I already have 3 questions for Mr. Rudolph. So are you ready to give us more explanation? Because it's a very interesting courses. For the first questions is from Zoom link. This is from Riah Asriani. And the question for Mr. Rudolph, this is your question, sirs. How to deal with babies over 2 years of age who often tantrum due to gadget, especially during COVID-19, where most activities at home can cause the stress and saturation for the babies. Because if it is not given, he will cry more. So how could it be, sir? Would you like to give the explanation more? And then,
Okay. So in those events, the crisis is actually not only with the child but with the parent of the child, because the child is in going tantrums because the things that they want is not given to them. So
okay.
as we have been trained to say to do actually during those times is to just let the tantrum be. You let it be. Then after the tantrum is done, then you provide other alternative for the child.
Yes.
That is what actually we do. Specifically if the children are toddlers, because the tantrum will not last for 30 minutes, for 20 minutes. So during the tantrum, you let them have the tantrum, but you provide safety. You need to make sure that they will not bang their head or jump off the window. They need to be safe. Then after they are done with the tantrum, you just tell them, so you're done. So this is what we will do now. They need diversion right after what they have done. Because if you will give in to the tantrum, they will use that tantrum to get what they want.
Okay. Okay, sir. Maybe your answer helped Madam Ria for the question. So we have to let it be the tantrum first and then we give it back. Okay. And the second question, sirs, it is from Nova Yusenta. How to prevent the depression of children during the COVID-19 pandemic because the children must study from home? The
Okay.
depression.
So this is actually a very difficult question to answer because there is no formula
Oh,
to actually prevent depression from every single person, because every person will have a different form of coping. So what we actually say is that we need to provide children with meaningful activities for them not to dwell with the time that they have at the moment. Because there are actually two problems. One of the problem is that sometimes the children have too much time with them and too little things to do. That's one. Another possible source of the problem is that they have so much time to do, but so much things to do, but so little time to do it. So if the main problem is the first one, they have so many time, but they do not have things to do, we as the parents or the significant other must provide meaningful activities to these children. So we need to teach them diversionary activities. Remember, most often than not, one of the reasons why people will be depressed during lockdown period, especially during COVID times, is because they have too much time with them. They tend to ruminate. They think of the things that they could be doing instead of just being here. So that might be one of the reasons why they go into depression. And the other thing is the most common reason is they have so little time but a lot of things to do, especially if they have classes.
oh, classes.
Now, remember, this is the difficult part to understand, because we cannot control as the parent. If we are the parent, we cannot control what the school will require of our children. We can only have control over the things that we can actually manipulate as parents. The children also can only control the things that they can manipulate. So they cannot change what the school will give them. But the parents can actually coordinate with the school to tell the school, this is not working. What you're doing is not working. We need a different approach. And because you are the parent, you have control over one thing of your children, and that is routine and schedule. Routine and schedule. So that is the thing that we can provide our children with. We need to give them routines and schedule so that they will have different spaces wherein they can perform their different function. For example, children are before children are used to be at school from around 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. But now they cannot go to school. They need to be at home facing the computer on the same time. So if I am the parents, I will tell my child, okay, so from 9 to 12, you will be doing school things. From 12 to 2, you can do anything that you want. Then 2 to 4, you will do again school things. Then 4 onwards is family time. They need to have routines. This one you can control because you are the parents. And the other thing that the parents can help the children with is we need to actually always talk with our children. We need to have them open up to us. That if they have any concerns, they can always approach the parent. Because sometimes the children will not go to their parents for concerns simply because they were not trained to do it. They would rather talk with their peers of their concerns. But the main problem with talking with the peers of their concerns is that these same people, their friend, also have the same problem. So at times they cannot really answer for the problem of their friends. It is the parents that needs to know. But children will not actually go to the parents simply because it is not they were not used to it. So the parents needs to tell the child over and over again that anytime you can always approach us.
Okay.
You can be open to us.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so the parent is the main role of the conduction of to all the what we call depressions and so many aspects that happens in the children itself. Okay, sir. Thank you so much for this answer sessions. So hopefully it can be benefit for the participants and to all the institutions. And I'm sorry, sir. Let me to open access to give us open access to Google Drive, so can give us the open access so we can open your materials from the Google Drive, maybe.
Okay.
So we can access the materials from the Google Drive. Okay, sirs. Thanks a bunch for Mr. Rudolph for the courses that you already given to me and to all the participants. We wait for the next sessions and then we are going to move to the other speakers, to the second speakers. Okay, thank you, Mr. Rudolph. And we are going to the next session. Okay. The respectable all the participants, I'm so sorry because the question that I'm not reading yet. You can what we call read the materials from the Google Drive. Jadi untuk pertanyaan-pertanyaan yang sudah masuk tetapi tidak ditanyakan, disampaikan oleh pemateri nanti bisa dibaca-baca materinya because the limitation of the time is itself. Okay. We are going to the second sessions. The second speakers, it's already get ready. Okay. Good afternoon or good morning, sir, at Africa, Ghana.
Yes, it's good morning here and good afternoon.
Good morning. Wow, it's still morning because in Indonesia it's already afternoon and almost evening, sir. Okay. Okay, Mr. Robert, I'm going to what we call read the curriculum vitae from Mr. Robert. Mr. Dr. Robert Kayeboah, BSc, MBH, MPH, Mengisi PS, live in Kumasi, Ghana, and the education background are membership in public health at Ghana College of Physicians of Surgeons. It is in Accra, Ghana. And then the Master of Public Health in Royal Tropical Institute and Vrije University, Amsterdam of Netherlands. And then the bachelor programs of medicines and surgery, the schools of medical science KNUST in Kumasi, Ghana, and then the Bachelor of Science in Human Biology, School of Medical Science KNUST, Kumasi, Ghana. Wow, it's a very amazing education background search that I read. Okay, and then the past work experiences, Mr. Dr. Robert as the Senior Technical Advisor NCD Healthy Heart Africa projects. So, and then the publication, so many. One of them is the evaluation of the maternal death surveillance and response system in the northern regions of Ghana. And that's all the simplified identity from Mr. Robert. And then we are going to the next session. Mr. Robert will deliver the courses entitled Environmental Influence on Children's Health and Development, because environment is a very supporting factors influence the children's health and development, sirs. So we have to know it. What are the environmental influence itself? Okay, and then sirs, you have times 45 minutes to deliver the course for us. So after that, the questions and answer session will be followed later on. Okay, please welcome to Mr. Robert to deliver the courses. Time is yours.
Okay, so thank you so much, and hello to your listeners. Yes, so I'll be presenting on the environmental influence on children's health and development. I hope that you find the presentation as educative and stimulating as possible. Okay, so by way of the outline, we'll do a brief introduction. We'll go through a conceptual framework to help our understanding of the topic. We'll try and look at the various categories of environmental exposures. And then we'll give some particular attention to the prenatal exposures because those are very important. And then we delve into the four broad categories of environmental exposures. These are physical, social, community, and then the cultural. And then last but not the least, we do a bit on best practices and evidence-based interventions, and then we conclude. Yes, so by way of introduction, when it comes to the influences that have an impact on child health and development, there are quite a number of them, but basically you can look at three broad categories. So the first will be the biological influences, and generally this include what makes up our DNA, so the DNA makeup of a person. And generally this would include the genetic expressions that would influence physical diseases and conditions later in life. Again, we have the behavioral influences. This typically will encompass emotions, beliefs, the thoughts and attitudes, which end up showing us behaviors that we see and which will influence health-seeking behavior and so on and so forth. And then the one that is the subject of our attention this morning or this afternoon at your end is the bit of the environmental influences. And these are usually external and they are very broad ranging from infectious agents, air pollution, social factors, the cultural environment, and so on and so forth. And so we'll go into those details as we proceed. Now, it's always useful when thinking about a particular topic or a particular subject to have a certain model in mind, typically what we call a conceptual framework. This is a sort of analytical tool which enables you to have a more detailed understanding of the subject that you are trying to understand. And so one of the more common ones when it comes to the environmental influences and their role in child health and development is what is called the Mem Model, which in full is the multiple exposures, multiple effects model. Now, this model essentially looks at the exposures, it looks at outcomes, It looks at the context, and then finally, which actions can be taken as relates to environmental influences on child health. And so the model basically suggests that there are a number of individual exposures which lead to different health outcomes. And in the same vein, these specific health outcomes can also be attributed to different exposures, hence the name multiple exposures, multiple effects. Now, it is always good to look at the context, because there's a popular saying in child health that you always have to ask yourself, why is this child from this place having this condition at this particular time? So the context matters a great deal. So in looking at the context, it's always useful to look at the social circumstances, the economic or demographic circumstances relating to a particular individual, in order to help you have a fair understanding of what is going on. And then last but not the least is the bit on the actions. When you have knowledge on what are the exposures and what the outcomes are, we just don't sit back and fold our arms. You have to institute certain actions to correct or improve the situation. And so these actions are either targeted at reducing the exposures, which will ultimately lead to a specific outcome, or once the outcomes have already occurred, you want to limit the severity of those outcomes. And so we'll give a few more details as we go ahead. So in summary, this is the model. This is how it looks like. As I've mentioned, we have the context at the top, where we have the three: social, economic, and demographic. And then on the left-hand side, you see the exposures. And the exposures, we have those which are more close to you, the proximal ones, and then the ones which are a bit more distant, which are the distal exposures, spanning from home right through to the ambient environment. And these, as I've said, potentially can cause a particular health outcome. Either you'll be well, either you come ill, or you die. And again, these health outcomes vary, and they range from, as I've said, well-being through mortality. And then last but not the least, we have the preventive actions and then the remedial actions. Having an idea of what the exposures are, what the outcomes are, we need to institute some actions in place to improve the health outcomes of a particular child. Yes, so again, in summary, you see that the role of the biological influences, the behavior and the environmental influences, they interact and they vary across life. But at the same time, there's a particular window in life that all these factors would play a particular role or not. So a typical example is a drug like thalidomide, which, even though it has several adverse effects when taken in the prenatal period, its effect is during a particular narrow window of between 4 and 8 weeks of the antenatal period. So beyond that period, if you take that drug, it may not have the dangerous side effects that will be seen subsequently. Again, as I've said, it is also important to know that no single exposure may completely explain a particular outcome, and hence the model we've talked about, that you always have a number of exposures which will eventually lead to a particular outcome and vice versa. Yes, so in terms of the categories, as I have mentioned, there are 4 broad environmental categories. So we can think of the physical environment, we can think of the social environment, we have the community environment, and then the cultural environment. All these are environmental factors, and they are factors which are external to the individual, which would influence a child's health or development. And so now we'll go into a bit more detail in each of these categories. So with the physical environment, as you know, there are a wide variety of external conditions which can influence a particular child's development. And the exposure is usually cumulative, in that it is a sum of all the exposures over time. So sometimes one single exposure may not be sufficient. You need to have cumulative and multiple exposures over time and which eventually will play out in a certain way, in that the child will develop a particular condition or will develop in a particular way, which is undesirable. And then, as I've said, a critical part and often overlooked is the influences that would occur in the prenatal period. And I'm sure for some of us who are midwives, will appreciate this better, because the prenatal and the antenatal period is a critical period in the life of any child. So by way of specifics, typically we tend to see the prenatal exposures relating to the events that happen in pregnancy. And these are usually, there are usually a number of sources. This would include the maternal occupation, some substance use or abuse, including alcohol, tobacco, the use of drugs, certain foods that mothers may consume during pregnancy, and even the sources of water, so on and so forth. The list is not exhaustive, but we'll just go through these few examples just to illustrate the point. So one of the main conditions that we see, which is as a result of prenatal exposures, is what is called the fetal alcohol syndrome. And this is typically as a result of excessive consumption of alcohol during pregnancy. And so you see on the image in the right hand of on this screen, you see a child who is showing some of these features. So you have a small chin, an indistinct philtrum almost flattened out. You see these ear abnormalities. We have a low nasal bridge, and so on and so forth. Classical features of fetal alcohol syndrome. And it is important to know that this is irreversible. So you can imagine this damage that has been done in utero even before this child is born. Some of them even end up having mental retardation as a complication. Another classical example is the Thalidomide Scandal, or the tragedy, depending on how you look at it. So thalidomide, interestingly, is a drug that was in 1957 first advertised as a drug to be used for conditions in pregnancy, such as tiredness, morning sickness, which is a particularly annoying symptom you have in pregnancy. And so this drug was actually available over the counter. Unfortunately, over time, it became apparent that the use of this drug in pregnancy was contributing to a number of birth defects. And so you see in the image, the most common birth defects you would see would be the limb defect. So you see this boy in this image who has virtually a shortened forearm. And this is certainly not desirable, but it's also as a result of the mothers who took this drug during pregnancy to stop those symptoms of morning sickness and so on and so forth. And so you begin to see the impact that this drug had. Eventually, it was stopped as its use was suspended in relation to pregnancy, but it is currently still in use. It's used more for cancer these days. And then another example, classical example, is what we call the congenital Minamata disease. So as the name suggests, once there's congenital, it means that there's some adult version. And this one is particularly interesting because Minamata is a city in Japan. And apparently in the 1930s, there was a company who was not taking good care of their waste disposal. So they ended up disposing of their byproducts, essentially mercury sulfate, into water bodies. Now, unfortunately, over time, this mercury sulfate was metabolized by some bacteria in the water into methyl mercury. Now, methyl mercury is particularly poisonous for humans. And then this methyl mercury was now being concentrated in the fish in these water bodies. And so over time, as humans began to eat this seafood, the fish, the shellfish, and so on and so forth, eventually they began to show certain symptoms. And these symptoms usually would include general weakness, numbness, sometimes blindness, hearing impairment, even to the extent of mental retardation, and then last, death. So over time, they had realized this in the adult population. But soon after, let's say about 4 or 5 years after, when they realized that it was because of eating fish and seafood was the cause of this condition, they began to notice that a lot of babies and children were also having similar symptoms, even though they were not being fed fish. And strangely, at that time, the thinking was that, okay, if the mother does not, if the child does not eat fish, it is not likely that he would have been exposed, because the thinking at the time was that the placenta is able to act as a barrier to prevent any toxins in the blood from affecting the unborn child or the newborn baby. But rather, it was rather the opposite. When it comes to methyl mercury, the placenta rather acts as a sieve, so it pulls out all the toxins or the poisons in the mother's blood and gives it rather to the baby. So that would explain how come we were beginning to see these signs and symptoms in babies and children who had not been fed fish. And so that is the congenital Minamata disease, again, as a result of exposures. Yeah. And then the last one, obviously, is prematurity from tobacco smoking. Tobacco has several effects, but notable in newborns is, or in the antenatal period, is the issue of prematurity and the complications that arise from prematurity. Okay, and then we also have the infectious agents. These are also considered physical and within the environment. And so children are particularly prone to these infections as a result of their exploratory behavior. They have limited exposure to some of these infectious agents. Their immune system is still developing, and also they come into contact with other children who may have disease conditions, and so they pick up some of these infections. And so these would range from the respiratory infections, which are typically from droplets, sneezing, coughing, and so on. We have the diarrheal ones, which typically are fecal-oral. And then we have some of the parasitic infections, such as malaria, which is a very common disease worldwide. Yeah, so another category under physical environment is also the issue of air pollutants. We have a globalized world now, a lot of industrialization, companies left, right, and many times we are producing a lot of pollutants. Typically, we have carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, tobacco smoke. All of these potentially can lead to respiratory infections and also trigger certain conditions such as asthma, or eventually may predispose to certain cancers, especially lung cancer. We also have the issue of household air pollution from the use of solid fuels in many parts of the world, especially in lower middle income countries. There's a lot of heavy reliance on the use of solid fuels, firewood, charcoal, and what have you. And the pollution that comes from this is thought to cause up to more than 50% of lower respiratory tract infections in children under 5 in these lower middle income countries. Again, the burden of pneumonia is so great in all over the world, and it is actually thought that its air pollution would account for over 50% of the burden of pneumonia that we have all across the world. So that just tells you the impact of air pollution on children's health. Another one of interest would be the water pollutants. And these would either be biological or chemical, and typically would end up showing or manifesting as a diarrheal diseases, which would account for about 10% of all the deaths in children under 5, mostly in Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And as mentioned, the typical organisms, the biological agents would include pathogens such as rotavirus, hepatitis A, and salmonella. Again, it is important to note the role of safe drinking water, ensuring adequate sanitation, and then avoiding practices such as open defecation, how they influence water pollution, and even at an early age. And so you see an image there of two kids who seem to think that the public toilet is meant for adults and it's not for children. So that's an example of behavior here and certain perceptions, even though they may be wrong. Then we also look at the issue of food contaminants. This is also increasingly an important influence on child health. These would either be pathogenic, which is disease-causing, or toxic, which are poisonous substances. And so, again, these would fall into a number of categories. You have the pesticides, which may have been applied to the food source on purpose. And then we have these colors, flavors, or preservatives. I'm sure you are familiar with quite a few artificial food colors and so on, which are used in the processing aspect of food manufacturing. And then we have chemicals that are mistakenly introduced to food. And so increasingly, there's been a lot of concern about the impact of these kind of chemicals, which are potentially toxic and would influence a child's behavior. A typical example are the AFCs, which is the artificial food colors. They are thought to influence child behavior and actually worsen children's attention, those children who have attention deficient hyperactive disorder. And so it is thought that as you begin to remove these kind of toxic chemicals from the foods, you see improvements in these child's conditions. Another one is also the issue of radiation, and depending on where you are, we have issues such as ultraviolet B radiation, which is typically from sunlight exposure, high sunlight exposure. If you're in the tropics, may not be a big concern, but if you are light-skinned, especially in Africa and some of the other tropical places, for those who are albinos, they tend to suffer a lot from this kind of radiation exposure. And so they are prone to having skin cancer, having sunburns, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we have the man-made radiations. And that is one of the reasons why medical x-rays, as much as possible, are not indicated in pregnancy because of the risk of certain birth defects, such as microcephaly, mental retardation, and then nerve damage, basically, to young children, not to talk of the risk of cancer. Yes, so we have what is considered as a built environment. These are man-made structures which are part of the physical environment. And typically, this would also influence a child's health or development in one of two ways. One would be, on the negative side, will be the issue of injuries. And then the positive side, in a certain way, will be physical activity. So by virtue of injuries, you will notice that between the ages of 1 and 19, injuries are the leading cause of death. It will surprise you. And one of them, which is drowning, is actually the leading injury in children under 5, with as many as 66,000 deaths occurring in 2012 alone in that age category. And then in the United States, playground injuries are well documented and account for over 200,000 emergency department care provided to children every year. Now, the risk factors are typically not far-fetched. The main ones would include a lack of supervision, a child who's playing with playground equipment, which is not age-specific. You want to consider what are the fall surfaces when a child falls off the playground equipment. Is it secure? Is it safe? You want to see how well they are maintaining the equipment, and then what are the physical barriers that are in place to avoid injuries. And so these are things to look out for, whether as health professionals, or even as parents, when you go to a playground, you go to a swimming pool area, you want to look out for some of these things so that you end up not exposing children to injuries, which will eventually affect their health. And then on the other side, the availability of these schools, parks, sidewalks, and so on would also influence the opportunities for physical activities or the lack of it. And as you know, worldwide, childhood obesity is on the rise. And actually, children who are overweight and obese are more likely to stay into adulthood as obese, and also more likely to develop non-communicable diseases such as diabetes and other cardiovascular diseases, including hypertension and hypertensive heart disease. Then we now move on to another category, which is the social environment. Now, the social environment, because humans are social creatures, we interact a lot with people. So you can imagine that that social environment will now influence a child's development or outcome. And specifically, under social environment, we look at the family influences. These are either considered as the processes or the demography. So earlier on I made a statement about why is this child from this particular place having this condition at this time. So you may have a child who is born to a single parent in a low socioeconomic bracket with relatively lower educational background. And this can manifest, for instance, in poor nutritional status of children because of the choices in terms of feeding choices that this child is likely to receive as a result of the makeup of the family. It will also impact how well this parent or this caregiver would seek care for this child when a child is not feeling well. So those are the demographics. Then we can also look at the processes. In terms of the processes, we consider how family influences well-being, the well-being of a child. So in many parts of the world, especially among Blacks and Black Africans, Black Americans, sorry, we have what is called the no-nonsense parenting, which means that very strict parenting, you either obey the rules or you receive harsh treatment, including physical abuse. Now, some would argue about the merits or the disadvantages of such parenting style, but depending on where you are, there will be different pros and cons. Okay, others would have a more permissive parenting style because they feel that the harsh approach, and it's been shown that sometimes the harsh approach can affect a child's cognitive and mental development and even emotional development as well. So all these would contribute to the processes when it comes to the social environment. Then again, we look at the community. So we don't live in isolation just in our families. We also have the broader community that we live in. Again, this can be thought of again in terms of the demography and then the processes. The demography, again, we look at such characteristics such as poverty in a particular community, things to do with crowding and so on. So a typical example would be the urban slum dwellings. You see that typically the urban slum dwellings, that's where we have a lot of diarrheal diseases because of poor sanitation. We tend to have a lot of respiratory infections, especially childhood tuberculosis because of the overcrowding that occurs in these kind of dwellings. And then we can also look at the processes, which would mean that what is the extent to which people in the community interact with each other, how well do they care about each other, and even share responsibility for each other's children. And an interesting thing happened about 2 weeks back. A colleague was telling me about how during the lockdown, children were staying at home, they were not going to school. And she had her children in her household being homeschooled because she's privileged. But in the same vein, there were other children who attend public schools, and because because of the lockdown, they are not going to school. So they end up in the morning, they end up roaming the streets. And she had noticed that they came to be climbing a tree in the area, and one of them fell off the tree and broke the back. And she felt so bad that she never went to tell them to stop because in her mind, she was minding her own business. So it just tells you about the kind of environment where you live in, what are the kind of processes that are there, how well do people interact with each other, how do they share responsibility, and how much do they even care about other children living in that community. And so all these would have an impact on a child's development or childhood development. Now, the last but not the least is the cultural environment. And as you know, culture is shaped by the ideas, beliefs, and values that a particular group of people hold on to. And it's not just limited to families. And this would inevitably influence whether you are going to have you're going to live well and have a healthy lifestyle, or you're going to have, you're going to take a risk and also not seek care as appropriate. And so I have a few examples for the sake of time. So the first are food taboos during pregnancy and childhood. In many African communities and some Asian communities, it is restricted or is forbidden to feed a child eggs. Now, eggs are meant to be very proteinaceous and very nutritious foods, good for a child's development. But the thinking and the belief in many of these societies is that feeding a child eggs would make the child's mind dull. Okay. And so it is contributing to a lot of protein, energy, and malnutrition in these places. Then we have what is called force feeding of girls in Mauritania, also known as Le Bleu. What happens is that it is thought that being big or being fat is a sign of beauty. If you are skinny, you are not considered beautiful. And so actually in Mauritania, we have old women, usually 60 years and above, whose job it is to force feed children, especially girls, with the idea that they will become beautiful and more attractive for marriage. And then the last one, and you can imagine the kind of emotional stress and the emotional torment that these young girls will face at an early age. And then once they become obese, also they are more predisposed to having non-communicable disease and so on. And then we have female genital mutilation in many parts of the world also as another example. And the reasons typically will be for religious purposes and to maintain sexual morality. Yeah, so just a few images of force feeding here. You see this young girl who is being force fed, and you see these two pieces of sticks being used to inflict pain. So that if the young girl is not eating the food as she's expected to, then they give her a bit of a squeeze on the feet. It's very painful practice. And then the end result when she's older is that she becomes somebody who is overweight. And this is thought to be attractive, but as I've said, it comes with a lot of negative consequences. And then we see female genital mutilation happening here. You see the kind of crude instruments that are being used here. These are unsterilized, and the risk for infection is very high. Yeah, so the last bit of the presentation is the best practices, and these are categorized into the outcomes as we spoke about in the conceptual framework. So in terms of infectious and parasitic diseases, studies have shown that if you were to improve on the use, or if you were to use solid fuel stoves, we could see a reduction of up to 50% of childhood pneumonias. Again, interventions that work or improve on drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene have been shown to reduce diarrhea in children by between 45% and 23%. As for when it comes to malaria and malaria prevention strategies, it's well known. I wouldn't go into too much detail. The same for interventions looking at safe disposal of human excreta. And that is why there's a lot of emphasis on open defecation-free societies. And then when you look at the neonatal period, in Belgium, they enacted legislation which banned all kinds of indoor tobacco smoking. And this translated into reductions in preterm births. A similar result was seen in the United States of America, where you have several cities which have smoke-free policies. So certain places you are not allowed to smoke. And again, it's been shown to be improving child health outcomes. We've already spoken about the impact of water, sanitation, and hygiene on the child's health. When it comes to the NCDs, we spoke about radiation. So high exposure to sunlight can predispose to certain cancers and injuries, photoallergies, and so on. And so the US Preventive Task Force actually recommends that we counsel children, adolescents who have light skin or fair skin to minimize the exposure, to use protective creams and so on, to limit the chances of developing these kind of complications. And then also there are a number of interventions which target particular triggers to avoid having asthma in the childhood, in childhood. Last but not the least is the issue of drowning. So in Bangladesh, they instituted an intervention for children between 4 and 12 years. And this included swimming lessons, having the supervision, having awareness on the risk of drowning, water safety, rescue skills, and so on. And this was able to reduce the risk of drowning by as much as 90%. And also another intervention was that to improve the supervision of children under 5 years in childcare centers also was found to reduce drowning by more than 80%. And these are all very cost-effective interventions, not to mention having barriers, pool fence, so that children do not stray into pools unattended. This is also shown to be very effective, up to 73%. So in concluding, I'd like to say that up to 26% of childhood deaths and 25% of the disease burden in children are actually attributed to environmental exposures. And so you see the burden of the environment as it relates to child health. And for a lot of these, there are a lot of preventive interventions that can be taken. And I'd like to emphasize for us all the need to stress on primary prevention, because as they say, prevention is always better than cure. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to receive any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks in advance to this course for Mr. Dr. Robert for the explanations of the materials. It's a very detailed explanations because we all know about the experimental influence on children's health and development. So in this case, I'm sorry, sir, I'm going to use Indonesian language because I'm going to try to explain to the other participants from Indonesia. Yes, wait a moment, sir. Oke, jadi begini Ibu-Ibu. Jadi Mr. Robert setelah menyampaikan environmental influence on children's health and development, jadi perkembangan kesehatan itu faktor lingkungannya itu apa saja sih gitu. Jadi di sini sudah saya rangkum bahwasanya ada 4 lingkungan kategoris environment kategoris. Yang pertama itu ada physical, ada social, community, and cultural. And the 4 factors is a very related and it is a crucial things that we have to know it. Jadi untuk yang physical itu mengafeknya ke children's health by exposing them to a wide variety external condition. Jadi ke faktor eksternalnya. Kemudian nanti social environment-nya itu social influence-nya. Jadi bisa meliputi terkait dengan family, keluarganya, kemudian prenatal period. And then the community environment meliputi komunitas demografisnya dan bagaimana prosesnya. Kemudian cultural environment itu tadi ada determinants of behavior. Tadi Mr. Robert sudah menampilkan bahwasannya tradisi hitan di Afrika seperti apa gitu ya. Untuk environmental influence-nya kurang lebih seperti ada 4 kategoris gitu. Untuk selanjutnya nanti ibu-ibu bisa membuka handbooknya dari Dr. Robert yang sudah kemas dengan baik di PowerPoint-nya, nanti bisa dibuka-buka kembali. Oke, sekarang saya sudah mendapatkan 2 pertanyaan dari ibu-ibu sekalian. Jadi saya akan membacakan, kemudian nanti saya akan menggarisbawahi jawaban dari Mr. Robert. Oke. Okay, thank you so much, sir, for the times. And today, now in this session, I'm going to deliver the questions that I already make a note for this line. The first is from Madam Eka Triwulandari, and the questions is, what is the effective ways to build community environment which is not care about the healthy in that field? So what is the effective way, sir? Could you tell me a little about the description of that? The effective way to build community environment.
Yes. So with the community environment, it's more to do with the kind of interactions and the care that people would give to each other, and not just for your own children, but for other children as well. And so very often it is depending on the context. If you live in a community which is open, has strong social networks, where people look out for each other, then generally that helps. Where you have more conservative societies where people tend to mind their own business, it's a bit more difficult because the society itself does not lend itself to that kind of communal structures which will benefit a child's health. So it is one of those where the context is particularly important. As you remember in the framework that I spoke about, the context is particularly important. And so the short answer is that it depends on the context and then how well people in that society are willing to interact with each other, and then the social networks that will enable them to look out for each other. And I gave you the example of the colleague who watched on for somebody else's child to fall off a tree. You know, if it was in such a community where people care about your neighbor's child and there are structures in place to report that, oh, these children are walking around aimlessly, what can be done for them, or they can even draw attention to the parents involved, then that situation would not have arisen. Yeah, so basically it is largely context specific.
Okay, so I catch the point that the interactions context the important things that to make the effective ways. Jadi ibu-ibu, pertanyaan dari Ibu Eka bahwasanya ada tidak sih effective ways dari untuk bagaimana cara membangun community environment. Jadi yang paling efektif adalah kita harus memahami tentang interaksi konteksnya tersebut. Gitu. And the second question, sir, the last questions for you. How much the effect of child obesity affect to the intelligence, especially their activity? Because nowadays, in fact, so many cases of the children obesity. So how could it be? Is that what we call effect for their intelligence?
Typically not.
No.
Typically not. The impact of obesity more has to do with non-communicable diseases. And so eventually, because of the obesity in childhood, they tend to remain obese also in their adulthood. And as you know, this would predispose them to the non-communicable diseases such as the diabetes, the hypertensions, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
At a worst case scenario, they can develop a stroke, for instance, which may potentially affect their cognitive function or the way their brain functions. But it's unlikely to directly affect mental health on its own, unless, of course, they develop a complication like a stroke or something like that. But it's not typical.
Okay, so jadi pertanyaan dari Mega Rahmawati bahwasanya how much the effect, jadi ada efeknya tidak sih? Ternyata typically it's not, jadi tidak mempengaruhi antara child obesity dengan intelligence-nya, jadi let it be go on gitu, jadi tergantung dengan cognitive function-nya, begitu. So that's all, sir, for this sessions of the materials from about the environmental influence on children's health and development. It's a very clear explanation from Mr. Dr. Robert. Hopefully it can be benefit for us so we can know more about this one so we can apply in our environment. We try to know it. Okay, thank you so much, sir, for the times for give us the materials for broader insight. So hopefully you more healthy and then be patient for joining these sessions. Just wait it for. Thank you so much, sir, and good afternoon. Good morning, I mean.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Okay, sirs. Ya, baik untuk para participants. Jadi kita sudah dua keynote speaker that's already delivered the materials, and then we are going to next or the last speakers that we have to know about the materials. Jadi untuk speaker terakhir ya Bu Eka ya. Ya, untuk speaker terakhir dari Ibu Dr. Emi Nurjasmi, MKes. Ibu bisa di turn on videonya.
Oh, wait.
Okay. For Mr. Robert and Mr. Rudolph, because the third speaker is from Indonesia, so we are so sorry if we use Indonesia, so you can listen us enjoy and hopefully you can be understood about what are we saying about like that. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
You heard me?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore dan salam sejahtera buat kita semuanya.
Ya, Ibu.
And I would like to thanks to the organizer invite me to share some information here, and also I can get some information from our respectful speaker. Thank you, Dr. Robert. And also, who wants? Who the other one?
Rudolph.
Oh, Rudolph. Okay, sorry. Okay, now that's I would like to share screen first. Can you see?
Yes, we are going to see it.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. That in this session, in this time, actually, I would like to give the overview of the role of midwife in child health care. Specifically, maybe we are talking about the 1,000 days early life care. I think my colleagues from Indonesia, they are already known, I think, this information, but this time I just would like to review. Yeah. Okay, let me see the child health situation in Indonesia. We can see trend child under 5 years nutrition status. There is the statistic, there is the graphic from 2013 and 2018. Okay, let we see there is the malnutrition with decrease but a small number. Also, stunting here, short, stunting, sorry. This is stunting and short child. Also, we get the decrease, but also it's not enough number, not achieve our target yet. Also, there is the children with kidney, yeah, and also there is the fat children. And I think that in 5 years, if we see in this graphic, our achievement is not yet related with our target. That's why for the next future, for the next 5 years, until 2023-24, we have the target for all maternal and child health in Indonesia. And also let we see for the newborn care, we are seeing who give the caring for the newborn care in Indonesia. There is in this pie diagram. Let we see, we are talking about the first neonates care, 6 until 48 hours after born. Let me see, 51% caring by midwife, 15% cared by pediatrician, 6% care by nurses, and 5% caring by OBGYN. This is the statistic. It means the midwife, they are very, very important for the maternal and child health. Also, if we are talking about antenatal care, childbirth, they take big number participation or contribution for maternal and child health. Now we just seeing for the newborn care. And the legal basis, I would like to overview, I would like to share information about midwife and midwifery in Indonesia. The legal basis of midwifery practice, fortunately, 2019, we established the Midwifery Law. And before this law established, we have already what we call Health Workforce Law, 2014, already established. And also the others decree, the others regulation who support our midwifery profession here, we call the Health Ministerial Decree number 320, established 2020. That's from Health Minister, Standard Profession of Midwife. In this standard of profession, also including competency standard and code of ethics of the midwife. And also we have the licensing of practical midwife. Also, this ministerial decree established by Ministry of Health. We have also midwifery care standard, national health insurance, who are influence midwifery care in Indonesia. There is who are closely influenced, because many regulation of course influence, but closely influenced to midwifery services. Okay, let me see first Health Workforce Law, established in 2014, what I mentioned, regulate for health workforce categories in Indonesia. In this law, the category of health workforce in Indonesia that we have a medical. Medical is consists of medical doctor and dentist, clinical psychologists, nurses, midwife, pharmacists, public health, sanitarian, nutrition, physical therapist, medical technician, biomedical technician, and traditional health workforce. I would like to inform in Indonesia that nurses and midwife, we are closely collaboration, but we are separate profession. And there is the midwifery law established from 2019, and there is the midwifery standard profession. Okay, let me see what are what are stated in the midwifery law. Midwifery services is a form of professional service that is an integral part of the healthcare system provided by midwife, could be independently, collaboratively, and or referral. Midwife independent practice is a healthcare facility organized by midwife with professional education graduates to provide direct services to clients. This is, I show midwife independent practice. It means independent practitioner midwife clinics. Here in Indonesia, we have approximately 39,000 midwife independent practice clinic. And let we see also regulate by our law, how is the professionalism credentialing through certification, registration, and licensing process. We have the some midwifery education institution. When they are graduate, they have to follow the national competencies assessment. And also after they graduate, they finish and pass for the national competencies assessment, they will get the competency certificate. Based on this certificate, they will ask for the registration in the council. Registration certificate, when they fulfill the some requirement, they will get the registration certificate. Based on this registration certificate, they can asking for licensing when they would like to start to work as a practitioner midwife. The licensing that will provide by district health officer, and they will get the license certificate. Of course, they have some requirement. The procurement and also the facilities. Also, there is I show again the regulation who support midwifery practice in Indonesia. And registration process, every midwife who will carry out midwifery practice must have a registration certificate. Registration certificate is given by the council to the midwife who meets the requirements. Oh, sorry, why I have to explain this first? Because our speaker from abroad, it is also the good time for us to share our midwife in Indonesia to our colleagues from other countries. I'm sorry. Registration certificate is given by the council to the midwife who meets the requirements. Registration certificate valid for 5 years and can be re-registered after fulfilling the requirements. We stated and we decided we have to fulfill 25 professional credit points within 5 years. Fulfilling sufficiency in service activities, education, training, and other scientific activities. We call the continuing professional development. This part, this component, we can collect, we can get to get for the 25 professional credit points. Licensing process, let we see, midwife who will practice in midwifery must have a license wherever they are practice in midwifery. In their own clinic, in the public health, in the hospital, the community owner, or maybe the public hospital, they have to have the license. The same regulation, the same requirement. Practical licenses is provided by the health district regional government. How to get license? They must have registration certificate, which is still valid. They have the practice side. And license will valid also for 5 years. Midwifery practice are carried out at independent practice midwife clinic, what I mentioned before, And also they can practice in other healthcare facilities, in hospitals, public health center, and others clinic, or a public owner, or maybe the private clinics. Midwifery practices carry out in accordance with competencies and authority and comply with the code of ethics, profession standards, and standards operational procedures. Let me see the role of midwife. First, midwife as a care provider. Midwife also as a manager, and also midwife also as a counselor. Midwife also as an educator and facilitator. They can do also as a community leader, activator of community participation and women's empowerment, and also as a researcher. Depend on where they are working. They still can call as a midwife. Not just who are practice in clinic, no. It is the emphasis of this part. Let we see the scope of work and the authority of midwife. Also in our regulation, in our law, that we can do for maternal health, child health services, women reproductive health, and family planning. And beside this scope of work, also we have the task of midwife can be carried out independently or collaboration. Implementation of tasks is carried out in a responsible and accountable manner. Midwife in administering midwifery practices must be in accordance with their competencies and authority. In carrying out the provision of maternal health services, child health services, and reproductive health services for women and family planning can be done with a community midwifery approach. They don't have all of midwife, they should only can practice in hospital, but also in the community. Okay, let me see for the maternal health, pre-pregnancy, antenatal care, normal antenatal care, normal delivery, postpartum care, emergency in maternal health. And also, we have to take care for early detection of risk and complication during pregnancy, childbirth, postpartum, and post-miscarriage care, and continued with referral. Maternal care, let me see, in carry out their duties, our duties in providing maternal health services. The midwife has the authority to provide midwifery care before pregnancy, during normal pregnancy, during labor and normal delivery, in the puerperium or postpartum, conduct emergency care for pregnant women, childbirth, and referral, and early detection of risks and complications during pregnancy, childbirth, postpartum, as well as post-miscarriage care, and continue with referral. Let me see for the child health care, provide midwifery care for newborn, infant, toddlers, and preschoolers. Preschoolers in here that the elementary school starting for children with 7 years. It's been preschooler maybe 6 years before schools link. Provide immunization according to the program, monitor and growth and development of infant, toddler, and preschooler, as well as early detection of complication, growth and development disorders, and referral. And of course, we can provide emergency care for newborn, followed by referral. Let's see in child health services, to the newborn, infant, toddlers, and preschooler children, provide immunization, monitoring growth and development, early detection, and emergency care in newborn, followed by referral. This is the continuum of care in midwifery practice. We starting from pre-pregnancy, what we are doing with pregnancy women and couple, we can give the counseling, health education. We can give serve for the family planning, integrating reproductive health care. This is the pregnant woman, integrated antenatal care, antenatal class, immunization, childbirth preparation, and emergency care, maternal and child health handbook. We educate our client, the woman, with we have the what we call the maternal and child health handbook. In childbirth and neonatal, we do safe delivery, early breastfeeding, vitamin K, immunization, and postpartum family planning. This infant exclusive breastfeeding, basic immunization, monitoring growth and development of baby, provide vitamin A, integrated management of child illness. Also for the monitoring growth, child under 5 or under 6, monitoring growth and development of child under preschooling, immunization, supplementary feeding. This is for the child health, immunization screening, school health promotion, supplementary feeding, and also adolescent reproductive health. Reproductive women health, including also for the adolescent reproductive health. We can provide counseling for nutrition, HIV/AIDS, drugs, iron supplementation, and also the quality life for premenopause or climacterium, not for geriatric. Geriatric is not include our scope of work until premenopause or climacterium. That we can give also health education for how to maintain the quality of life, health life behavior, health education, and counseling. Okay, now let me see the role of midwife in child health care. That we are talking about the 1,000 days early life as a golden period. Everybody know. We starting from antenatal care. Of course, if we are talking 1,000 days, then antenatal care 270 days in the infant, and also 2 years. The total in these periods is 1,000 days of early life. In antenatal care, how we can ensure the women's receive the good nutrition, and also early breastfeeding, intranatal care, because the early breastfeeding is starting point to make it to making the successful for the exclusive breastfeeding. And in infant until 1 year, until 11 months, also the nutrition, how to fulfill. Until 2 years, infant nutrition and stimulation. This is what we are doing as a midwife, what we can do as a midwife to provide care for child in specifically 1,000 days early life. Let me see why nutrition in 1,000 day early life is important. I think that also are known about this. In our statistic also, in our situation, women with anemia, approximately 24%. Pregnant women with anemia, almost 50%. This is also evidence-based statistic. And what does it mean? We have to give the full caring, the full priority for the antenatal care. How the nutritional status of pregnant women until 1,000 days early life fetus. If this we cannot take care for this, maybe that could be done, could be could be occur. Also, let me see what the impact if we cannot give caring, good care, good priority or fulfill needed in these periods, that will influence for the brain's development, for the short-term impact, growth in body mass and body composition, and also metabolic disorders for the short-term impact. And for the long-term impact could be also for the cognitive and learning achievement. Stunting here, and also maybe they will get in the future some diseases, diabetes, obesity, cardiac disease, and so on. There is the long-term impact and also short-term impact. That's why we have to give the prioritize for the 1,000 days early life, starting from antenatal care, as well as actually in the adolescent reproductive health, because also mostly or there are the higher percentage of adolescents anemia in our country. The role of midwife on maternal and child health, reproductive health. Midwife is a care provider with a strategic and unique role as a partner for women and society, especially in carrying out their reproductive health cycle through holistic and sustainable care with the midwifery respectful care approach. Scope of practice: health promotion, disease prevention, care for pregnant and pregnant women, conduct or facilitate for normal delivery, postpartum care, care for babies, detect complication, carry out emergency, and referring high-risk cases and complication, and mobilizing community participation and empowering women and families. Because approximately 70% midwives who are working in the primary health setting in the community. Stimulation, how to optimize the growth and development. Let me see what we call the foster. In Indonesia, we call the asu, asi, asa. Foster, love, and hon. I think that we have to give the appropriate nutrition, immunization, and body clean lines, yeah, environment, clothing, and so on. And also this is for love, how to we can provide safe, comfortable, and protected, and so on. And also stimulation, that sensory stimulation, motoric stimulation, emotional, social, speech, cognitive, independently, creativity, and leadership. And also, as well as spiritual, even still, baby, we can also give the stimulation for the stimulation behavior. Okay, let we see now parenting for optimal growth and development of children. We have to cite the first that we are talking about parenting style to fulfill nutrition. We start from pregnancy, newborn baby with early breastfeeding, infant until 6 months with exclusive breastfeeding, and children until 2 years, breastfeeding and complementary food. And also we have to stimulate. We have to stimulate in monitoring growth and development. Stimulation, detection, yeah. Oh, this the stimulation, detection, early intervention in growth and development monitoring. We have Maternal and Child Health Handbook. We use this book as a tool, and we also have a tool what we call the DIDTK. And the take-home message: the continuity of midwifery care in optimizing growth and development in infant and children, that starting from the antenatal care. Of course, we have to follow the standards. Integrated antenatal care based on standard, early detection for risk factor, collaboration and referral if needed, counseling in nutrition, early breastfeeding, exclusive breastfeeding, family planning and immunization, antenatal class, women empowerment by using of a maternal and a child health handbook, and build the positive pregnancy experience by supporting emotional support from health provider and also from husband and also from family. And in intranatal care also, we have to conduct normal delivery care based on standard. We are using mother and baby friendly care, mother center care, women center care, psychological support, the essential newborn care, early breastfeeding, and also we have to build the positive childbirth experience by supporting from the health provider, husband, and also family. And also they can ask a people who will accompany her in intranatal care. Her husband, her mother, or her friend, depend on what they are, take a decision. Postnatal care with rooming in, baby and mother in one room, counseling for exclusive breastfeeding and nutrition, postpartum contraception, postpartum class, empower women and family. And also in infant and child health care that we monitor in growth and development. We give the health education counseling for exclusive breastfeeding, health education with also we are use the handbook for maternal and child health, immunization, stimulation, detection, early intervention in growth and development monitoring, health education, information, and counseling. And also mobilizing community participation and women empowerment. Once again, because 70% of midwives who are working with community, that we ask the community also involved in take care for their health. I would like to show the adaptation in pandemic era. This is by midwife this is the private clinic midwife. They use the virtual consultation. They use the MGH handbook, and they can interaction with mother for carrying out for the child health. I think, thank you so much for your attention.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam Dr. Amy, who already explained the materials well. So we already know about the rules of midwife for guiding the growth and the development of Indonesian children. Jadi bidan itu sangatlah penting ya Bu ya. Oke, perannya itu it's amazing. So in this case, I already make some notes that in bahasa. Jadi untuk para ibu-ibu partisipan, tadi Ibu Dr. Emi sudah mengatakan bahwasanya asuhan bayi baru lahir di KN1 itu 6-48 jam setelah lahir 50% dilakukan oleh bidan. So the midwife is a very crucial things and the important roles, the important ones in the healthy of the pregnancy and also the postpartum. Yes, okay. And then the conclusion, before I open the question session, I'm going to read the conclusion. Because the role of midwife, there are 6 midwife as a care provider, and then manager, counselor, educator and facilitator, community leaders, and researcher. So it's depend on the where we are, when and where we are working. So we can categorize in midwife, as a midwife. So we have to be proud as a midwife, ya, ibu-ibu. Oke, untuk sekarang we have to go to the next session. It's I have already 2 questions, Madam. So the first questions from Dian Palupi, kami ambil dari YouTube. Iya, untuk pertanyaannya adalah, what about service standards in area that are less attractive for healthcare workers who are still domicilied and they are still with use by using basic competence and they are still diploma 3 and not yet a profesi? It means that Madam Dr. Amy, would you like to explain about the service standard? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Devi. Yeah, good
Yes.
question. I think for the standard of care,
Good way.
standard of services for midwife who are graduate from the diploma program. We have 2 kind of graduation, diploma program and bachelor professional program. In the diploma program, they can do for the essential midwifery care. What are the essential? The essential midwifery care that antenatal care, childbirth, newborn care, child care until 5, and also family planning. They can do it. I think the standard is not different with the who are graduate from the bachelor. It is the including for the essential midwifery care. We have essential midwifery care, and we have also for the graduate from the bachelor professional midwife, what we call the comprehensive midwifery care. In comprehensive midwifery care, we add the authority, we add the competency for the professional midwife with the reproductive health, adolescent reproductive health. But for the basic, quite the same. Maybe in some skills that we in our competency standard, what was established in this year 2020, just different by the leveling. Let's say for the family planning, insertion IUD, insertion implant. In our competency standard, graduates from diploma program, they have to have the certification to do the insertion IUD and insertion of implant. In our competency standard also, now we just established this standard. That's why I would like to socialize to my colleagues in education institution from professional bachelor graduation, midwife who are graduate from bachelor professional program for the IUD insertion and implant insertion that they already have to achieve the level 4 in the competencies. It means if they can achieve this level of competency skills, they don't have to have the certification anymore. Did you understand?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, maybe I would like to explain in Indonesia.
Yeah.
Sorry.
To make it clear.
Because we have also to carry out our colleagues from
Yeah.
other. I think this webinar also maybe followed by or about midwife. Yeah, because
That's right. Yeah.
because you publish this webinar in the media, social media. Jadi kalau untuk yang yang dari D3 dengan dari profesi, kalau untuk yang esensial asuhan kebidanan itu masih bisa dilakukan. Sama. Postnatal, persalinan, bayi baru lahir, bayi dan balita, kemudian pelayanan keluarga berencana. Hanya pelayanan keluarga berencana tadi contohnya salah satu untuk pemasangan IUD dan implan kalau kita dari D3 kan harus punya sertifikat. Tapi di dalam standar kompetensi kita yang baru, untuk lulusan profesi itu dia sudah harus mencapai level 4 kompetensinya. Jadi kalau sudah level 4 nanti ada sertifikatnya menunjukkan bahwa dia sudah mencapai level 4, dia nggak perlu lagi pelatihan CTU. Ya, itu beberapa. Dan juga yang lebih banyak perbedaannya itu adalah pada pelayanan-pelayanan kesehatan reproduksi perempuan. Ya, untuk asuhan pasca abortus, untuk kesehatan reproduksi remaja itu tidak masuk kepada essential midwifery care. Mungkin itu.
Oke. So jadi kompetensi standarnya ya Bu yang perlu di involve in the rules of the Diploma 3 dan profesi. Oke. Dan pertanyaan kedua, the second questions from Lia Afrida. It's about stunting. From the chart shown earlier, there is stunting and very thin data. Which of the two has more influence on children's health in the future? About stunting.
Okay. Oh, wait the moment.
Okay.
Wait the moment.
Okay,
I have problem. I have problem with my. Oh. Wait.
Okay, we wait, ma'am.
Okay. You can repeat the question.
From the chart shown earlier, there is stunting and very thin data. Stunting dan very thin data. Which of the two has more influence on children's health in the future? Jadi lebih berpengaruh yang mana sih gitu?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. It is the other one. Wait. I would like to see the graphic here. Here, yeah. This you mean? Yeah. From stunting and?
Yes. It's about stunting and which one the more influence on children's health in the future?
Yeah. I think of course for the stunting, more influence based on the malnutrition.
Malnutrition.
Yes, malnutrition. And stimulation also could be influenced, but more influence based on the malnutrition. And also infection also could be influenced, but the proportion, the percentage, that's more influence based on the nutrition.
Okay, so malnutrition is the influence factors.
Yes.
Okay. That's all, madam, because we just have 2 questions. It's about service standards and about stunting. So hopefully it can be benefit for us because we know that the rules of midwife is a very important in our children's growth and the development itself. Yes. Okay, thank you so much, Madam Dr. Emi Nurjasmi, for giving such informative and interesting courses for us, so it can be benefit for us together. Okay, thank you and good afternoon, Madam.
Yes, good afternoon.
Okay. Okay, to the respectable all the participants, Finally, we come to the end part of the international webinar. Before I close, I would like to take the conclusion from the whole speakers have presented related to these topics. So we can make a note that the children's development is a very important and crucial things in our journey of the children itself, because we have environmental influences and then the midwife roles, and also we have to care about our children. So I'd like to thank you so much to all the speakers. For Mr. Hadono already give welcome speech, and then Madam Dr. Emmy, and then Mr. Rudolph and Mr. Robert, and also all the participants who already active for joining this webinar. Hopefully it can be benefit and we can broaden our knowledge inside. Okay, before I close and then I'm going to give it back to the host, I would like to say thank you so much, and that's all for me. Okay, Mr. Rudolph, where are you? And Mr. Robert, would you like to turn on the video so we can say goodbye for this session? As I wish this webinar will be beneficial for everyone. Amin ya rabbal alamin. Please give applause for the whole speakers and for you all.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. That's all for me as moderator. I give it back to the house to Madam Eka Triwulandari. Thank you so much. And the last I say, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Well, thank you, Ms. Devi, for guiding the webinar.
Okay.
And for the all participants, I will announce the lucky one who get the door prize. There are three person who will get the door prize. Okay. Okay. The name is Nur Aida, and then Lia Afida, and the last is Dian Palupi. Congratulations to you all. Yes. Untuk para pemenang nanti diharapkan menghubungi panitia. Baik, demikian tadi para peserta webinar. Banyak sekali ilmu-ilmu atau materi yang telah kita dapat dari para narasumber yang sangat istimewa pada hari ini. Terima kasih sudah mengikuti acara webinar kita dari awal sampai akhir. Kami mengucapkan terima kasih kepada seluruh pihak yang sudah membantu terselenggaranya acara ini. Semoga kegiatan ini bermanfaat bagi kita semua, dan semoga kita bisa bertemu lagi di lain kesempatan, di lain acara, dalam keadaan yang sehat dan walafiat tentunya. Baik, demikian tadi saya tutup untuk acara webinar kita. Saya akhiri. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih.
Berdasarkan surat dari Kemenristek Dikti pada tahun 2019 dengan SK nomor 417 KPT I 2019, Universitas Aisyah Pringsewu menawarkan konsep pendidikan model ilmiah Islami dengan mengedepankan pendidikan akhlak mulia dan pengembangan teknologi dan pembangunan nasional. Inilah terobosan pendidikan yang diharapkan mampu menjawab tantangan zaman dengan kader generasi unggul yang bertakwa, kompeten, dan berdaya saing. Fakultas Kesehatan, Fakultas Teknologi dan Informatika, Fakultas Sosial dan Bisnis.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sebagai universitas pertama di Kabupaten Fetal, kami menyediakan pemasukan pendidikan di Provinsi Lampung dan Kabupaten Fetal pada adapun visi kami yaitu menjadi universitas yang unggul dalam penyelenggaraan pendidikan tingkat nasional tahun 2030. Kami punya satu model pendekatan dan satu jadwal. Model pendekatan kami adalah model ilmiah Islami dengan mengedepankan bina akhlak mulia dan pengembangan teknologi dalam pembangunan. Adapun jadwal kami adalah beda, brief, energetic, dynamic, accountable. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Mari gabung bersama Rob.
Wah, beda.
Wah, beda. Wah, beda.